The moment the bank teller tore up the check, she had no idea who she had just insulted. But seconds later, when the ad screen behind her lit up with the face of the CEO she had just disrespected, the entire bank went silent. Judgment had come, faster than anyone expected. Marsha Johnson stepped into the downtown branch of the bank with a sense of quiet pride. The morning had gone perfectly. She had delivered a powerful keynote speech at a leadership conference, shaking hands with city leaders, young professionals, and fellow entrepreneurs. Her black blazer was crisp, her pearl earrings subtle, and her steps confident. She had done this hundreds of times in timed rooms where she was the only black woman, only to leave them with every head turned in respect. Now, with her consulting check in hand, she approached the bank teller line, not expecting anything unusual. But from the moment she stepped into the lobby, she could feel it. The eyes, the pauses, the small shift in energy that black women learn to notice early in life. A young white teller behind the glass gave her a once-over before turning his attention back to his screen. Marsha ignored it. She had business to do when her number was called. She walked up and greeted the teller politely, sliding the check under the glass. "Good morning," she said. "I'd like to deposit this." The teller picked up the check, looked at the amount $25,000 and then looked at her. His brow furrowed. He flipped the check over, stared at the signature, then looked back at her again. "And where did you get this?" he asked slowly, like he was speaking to a child. Marsha kept her tone calm. "It's payment for a business consultation," she replied. "I'm the CEO of M. Johnson Enterprises." He raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of money for consulting." Then, without asking for ID, without verifying anything, he said, "I don't think this is real." He reached for a small trash bin under the counter, tore the check down the middle, and dropped it in. The sound of the ripping paper was sharp, like a slap. Marsha froze. She blinked, stunned that it had happened so quickly, so casually. Around her, a couple of customers looked up. Another bank employee behind the teller window turned their head, eyes wide in disbelief. "You just destroyed a valid check," Marsha said slowly, her voice level but shaking slightly with disbelief. "That was a legal document." The teller shrugged. "You can take it up with management if you like, but fraud is fraud. We're trained to spot it." Marsha took a deep breath, reached into her purse, and pulled out her business card. It was sleek and professional. She slid it across the counter. "You just shredded payment from a Fortune 500 client. That check was very real." But the teller barely glanced at the card. "Anyone can print that," he muttered dismissively. At that exact moment, as if the universe had had enough of his ignorance, the large digital advertisement screen behind him changed. The bank had recently launched a campaign to spotlight influential local clients. The new ad faded in slowly and there she was, Marsha Johnson, her face on a glowing screen. "Meet Marsha Johnson," the ad read. "CEO, visionary, and valued client." The teller turned around, and his mouth fell open. The room shifted. A hush fell over the lobby as the glowing screen behind the teller continued to display Marsha's, that face, her name bold beneath it, along with the words valued client. For a few long seconds, nobody moved. The teller's expression was frozen in disbelief. His mouth was slightly open, as if trying to form an excuse, but none came. His eyes flickered between the screen and Marsha, whose calm demeanor hadn't wavered. She didn't smirk, she didn't gloat. She just looked at him steadily, letting the moment speak louder than any words. Around them, a couple of customers began whispering to each other, and a woman near the door took out her phone, clearly capturing the scene. The silent respect that Marsha commanded without raising her voice, without a single curse or shout, made the moment even heavier. The teller finally broke the silence, his voice weak. I didn't know," he stammered. Marsha's eyes narrowed slightly. "Didn't know what? That a black woman could be a CEO, that a professional check could be legitimate if it had my name on it?" she asked, her voice low but clear. "You tore up my check based on your assumption, not facts, not bank policy, just bias." The young man swallowed hard, but before he could respond, the bank manager, a middle-aged man in a blue suit, appeared from a side office. He looked confused at first, but when he saw the screen behind the teller and then recognized Marsha standing at the counter, his eyes widened. He rushed over. "Miss Johnson, I am so sorry," the manager said immediately, glancing at the teller with clear disapproval. "Please, come with me. Let's step into my office and straighten this out right away." Marsha hesitated, her eyes still on the teller. "You need to see what just happened here," she said. "Not because it happened to me, but because it's probably happened to others who didn't have their face on your wall." The manager nodded quickly. "Absolutely. I take this very seriously." Then he turned to the teller. "You are to leave the floor immediately. We'll be reviewing this incident in full." The young man didn't argue. He simply nodded, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and stepped away, avoiding every eye in the room. In the manager's office, Marsha sat across from him as he apologized again and again, offering water, his business card, and promises of an investigation. But she wasn't moved by apologies. "Your bank uses my image to promote diversity," she said calmly. "But what happened out there tells me it's just a surface-level show. Your staff isn't trained to actually respect The people behind the faces on those screens. The manager looked uncomfortable but nodded. You're right. There's clearly work to do. Marsha leaned back in the chair, crossing her legs. Bias isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a quiet assumption, a ripped check, a look that says, you don't belong here. But I do belong. And so do many others who don't have a spotlight behind them. The next morning, Marsha sat at her kitchen table sipping coffee, watching the story spread like wildfire online. Someone in the bank lobby had uploaded a short clip just a few seconds showing the moment the teller turned and saw her face on, with a screen paired with a tweet that read, "Teller rips up a black woman's check, then realizes she's the CEO on their own ad." The video had gone viral overnight. Thousands of retweets, comments flooded, and some full of outrage, others sharing similar stories. The hashtags #BankingWhileBlack and #RespectBlackExcellence were now trending. Marsha hadn't planned for this level of attention, but she wasn't surprised. This wasn't just about her, it was about what her experience represented. She knew the world was watching now, and she intended to make sure something real came from it. Later that afternoon, the bank's regional director called her directly. His voice was polite but tense, clearly aware of the PR crisis unfolding. He apologized profusely, assured her the teller had been suspended, and explained that a full internal review was underway. "We want to make this right, Ms. Johnson," he said. Marsha listened carefully. "Making it right," she replied, "doesn't just mean issuing an apology and hoping the internet moves on. It means real change, training, hiring, policy, accountability." This wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern showing itself. The director hesitated, then agreed to set up a formal meeting with her and other bank executives the following week. Marsha didn't want a private apology behind closed doors. She wanted accountability in the light. In the meantime, media outlets began reaching out, local news, then national ones. Journalists wanted interviews. Civil rights advocates were tagging her in statements of support. Marsha carefully chose her words in every response. "I don't need sympathy," she said in one televised segment. "I've succeeded in spite of people like that teller all my life." But what about the young entrepreneur depositing her first business check? What about the single mom cashing a refund? What happens when they walk in and get treated like frauds just for being who they are? Her message was clear. This wasn't about ego, it was about exposure at the same time. Support poured in from across the country. Former clients and fellow CEOs shared posts praising her composure and leadership. A well-known business magazine published a profile titled, "Grace Under Fire: How Marsha Johnson Turned Prejudice into Power." Still, Marsha remained focused. "This is not my moment," she told a friend. "This is a mirror, and I'm just holding it up for everyone to see." As the headlines rolled on, the teller's name was never made public, but the bank's internal emails leaked online revealed urgent memos about mandatory diversity training and crisis control. Inside her office, Marsha drafted a list of for the upcoming meeting with the bank's executives, not as a victim, but as a leader ready to demand better, not just for herself, but for every face that didn't get the benefit of the doubt. A week later, Marsha walked into the bank's headquarters, this time not as a customer but as a guest of power. She was greeted by senior executives in polished suits, their smiles tight with unease. The conference room had been prepped with refreshments and documents. But Marsha didn't come for coffee or pleasantries. She came for change. As she sat at the long glass table, facing the regional director, the diversity officer, and a panel of senior staff, she laid out her recommendations with clarity and calm authority. "If you're going to use the faces of black professionals to promote your brand," she said, "you must do more than celebrate us in ads. You must protect us in policy. You must respect us in practice." No one interrupted her. She wasn't angry. She didn't have to be. Her presence alone demanded attention, and her words left no space for excuses. She proposed a structured anti-bias training program developed in partnership with actual experts, not just generic slideshows. She urged them to create a clear, accessible complaint system for customers who felt profiled or mistreated. She pushed for hiring and promotion audits to evaluate diversity at every level, not just front-facing tellers, but decision-makers too. The room was quiet, serious. These weren't radical ideas, and they knew it. What stung was the fact that they were necessary at all. When she finished, the director thanked her with a nod. "You've opened our eyes," he said. "We can't fix what we don't confront." Marsha didn't smile. "You've always been able to confront it. You just didn't want to," she replied. Over the next few weeks, the bank rolled out its new commitments publicly. A press release detailed policy changes and mandatory staff training initiatives that would begin immediately. More importantly, they opened a community roundtable series, inviting clients of all backgrounds to speak directly to leadership. Marsha was the first featured guest. Her story, once a single viral post, had sparked a national conversation. She received messages from people across the country, young professionals, elderly customers, parents thanking her for speaking up when so many others felt silenced. She never once mentioned the teller's name. It wasn't about him. It was about the system that taught him to look at a black woman holding a check and see suspicion instead of success. Months later, the bank reached out again, this time not with apologies, but with a proposal. They wanted to fund a scholarship in her name for young black entrepreneurs and students pursuing business careers. Marcia accepted not for herself, but for the generation coming next. Standing at the scholarship's launch event, she looked out at a crowd of young faces, full of hope and fire, and said, "The world may not always greet you fairly, but you don't need permission to lead. You just need to walk in like you already belong, because you do." The applause was thunderous, and in that moment, the story wasn't about a torn check anymore. It was about a legacy built from dignity, truth, and unshakable power. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Subscribe to The Black Struggle for more powerful stories that deserve to be heard.